Hey, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and I'm not going to be talking about any specific part of my collection today. This is going to be one of my general episodes, something that I hope to do on a weekly basis going forward. So no review on just one toy or anything like that. I'm just going to be talking about my week. So what movies I saw, what comic books I read, what toys I purchased, and what kind of nerdy news caught my attention. So to start off telling you about my week, I just want to quickly mention something I did last night. I went and saw the band Tokyo Police Club. If you're not familiar with them, and you might not be unless you're Canadian, because I don't think they're really big anywhere else, but I recommend you check them out. It was a good time. But yeah, the only reason I'm going to share a little snippet of video with you is because I went with my fiance Vanessa and my best friend Miguel. And there were these two guys that were in front of us, and their heads kept getting in the way, and it was pretty annoying. And they both had these stupid haircuts where their hair was only shaved up to about here, and then they had kind of poofy hair on the top. And I said to Miguel, these guys were getting on my nerves, and then he made a comment that they looked like live-action versions of Beavis and Butthead, which was pretty apt. Unfortunately, I don't have a better shot of them, but you'll just kind of see their heads floating around here on the bottom of the screen. So yeah, here's a quick snippet of Tokyo Police Club. Yeah, so that was Tokyo Police Club. Check them out. And if you check them out and you like them, and you're wondering about any other kind of Canadian bands, by all means, hit me up in the comments, because I'm happy to talk music as well, and I've probably got some other bands I could recommend you check out. Anyway, so as far as toy news this week, there was some Star Wars news that came out of Star Wars Celebration. Star Wars Celebration is like a Star Wars convention that they have every year. So at the celebration this year, they revealed the trailer for the upcoming episode 9, and they also revealed some toys. So the only ones I'm interested in are the 6-inch Black Series. So for that, they revealed a new Emperor Palpatine. It comes with a throne, and that's pretty cool. I never did get Snoke and his throne, but now I'm kind of tempted to get them both, as they might look kind of cool bookending my Star Wars collection and their little thrones there. There was also a couple of 3-packs. So one of them, it's Kylo Ren, who I don't really need, but I'll probably end up getting this because there's 2 other like Stormtrooper variations. One of them is a unique character, Captain or Commander Pyre or something like that. I think he's from the new animated series. But anyway, he's like a Stormtrooper that's got a unique gold armor, kind of like Captain Phasma was a Stormtrooper in unique silver armor. And there's also a new Stormtrooper type called a Mountain Trooper in this set. So yeah, I'll probably want to check that out. Then there was a droid set that had all the most famous droids. So C-3PO, R2-D2, BB-8, and then some other droid I'm not familiar with. I don't know if this is a brand new droid for the new movie. But I might pick up this set just because I actually don't have a C-3PO or an R2-D2 yet. So at least I'm not buying a bunch of duplicate characters. And then the last one had Rey and Chewbacca and some new guy and a couple of Porgs. That's probably a set I could do without. But I don't know. Maybe I'll pick it up. I don't have a Chewbacca yet either. When I started buying Star Wars Black Series originally, I kind of wanted to just focus on like Stormtroopers and aliens. I thought I'm not going to buy any boring human characters, and I'm not even going to buy characters like 3PO and Chewbacca just because I have so many versions of them in the smaller format, and I just didn't feel I really needed any more of them. But now that my Black Series collection has grown quite a bit, it feels kind of odd to be missing some of these key characters. So maybe I should finally fill some of those slots. So yeah, I think that was it for Star Wars news. I don't think it was really a big announcement that some new Transformers were revealed, but the website where I buy a lot of my action figures is Big Bad Toy Store, and they had some new Transformers Siege figures show up for pre-order. So a couple that I'm excited about is there's one that's called Brunt, which is not one I was familiar with. I had to go back and look up and see who this guy was. And apparently he was a little purple cannon that was attached to Trypticon. Trypticon is the big robotic black T-Rex. I've got him. I'll cut to a shot of him right over there. Anyway, so in the vintage Trypticon figure, there's a little purple cannon attached to him, and I guess he was called Brunt even then. He was just a drone. He didn't have a robot mode. So it's kind of interesting that they kind of delved deep and made a figure of him now. So now he still transforms into a cannon, but he also transforms into a robot, which is kind of interesting. But the other one I'm excited about is back in the vintage line, there was 3 robots, and I don't know if they had, I think they were just all called Reflector. I don't think they had individual names. But these 3 guys all transformed together to make a camera. So kind of like the way Soundwave turned into a tape deck, Reflector, these 3 guys made a camera, and it was a camera that, you know, was to scale. When you were a kid, you could pretend it was like a real camera, I guess. But Reflector was not available in wide release. I'm not sure why. Like, he was released in Japan, and I guess Hasbro had bought that figure, the rights to that figure, to bring it over here into America, and it was intended to be part of the main line, but it never really hit stores. I think it was only available on mail order or anything. But I guess before that decision was made, Reflector was one of the Transformers that was put in the cartoon very early on. So there's lots of shots of the 3 Reflector triplets in the early cartoons. But yeah, he wasn't a figure that a lot of people had. And I always thought he was a cool looking character, and just because he was so present in those early shows, I've always wanted a version of him. I've never had any version of Reflector. There have been some nice third-party versions over the years. These third-party companies are unlicensed. They make these Transformer figures which don't have the official emblems or the official names. But I haven't pulled the trigger on any of those yet. Anyway, Hasbro is finally making an official wide-release version of Reflector, except now he's called Refractor, and he's only 1 figure, and he transforms into, I don't know, some stupid spaceship or something. But what's kind of neat is if you do buy 3 versions of the exact same figure, there is a mode where you can connect them all together, and they transform into a camera. So I don't know if I would bother to buy 3. I probably would if there's ways that you could alter their chests so they at least look like different robot characters, because in my mind I feel I need 3 of these guys to make the full Reflector. But since if I bought them, they'd all be identical, and I would never transform them into the camera mode. I don't really put any of my Transformers in their alt modes. So I don't know if I need to buy all 3. That's, like I said, if you could make them look somewhat individual, maybe if they had different, interchangeable faces, or, just something on the chest to make them look a little different. But I guess we'll see. When they eventually hit stores, I'll buy 1, or maybe I'll buy 3. I don't know. So yeah, that's it for new toy news. That caught my attention anyway. So as far as toys go, we'll stay in that vein, and I'll tell you about the new toys I got this week. So my first new toy this week is this Red Goblin figure. So this is from a new line of Spider-Man Marvel Legends, and the Build-A-Figure is the Kingpin. So this Red Goblin figure came with Kingpin's leg. So I got a ways to go before I complete my Kingpin. Anyway, so yeah, this is Red Goblin, and he's kind of a stupid character because he's Green Goblin mixed with Carnage. However, I kind of love it. I know it's stupid, but Green Goblin is my favorite Spider-Man villain, and when he merged with Carnage in Amazing Spider-Man 800, maybe about a year ago, maybe a little less, I thought it was kind of fun. I don't imagine he'll stay this way. The Red Goblin will probably be just like a little flash in the pan, and Norman Osborn will go back to being the Green Goblin instead of this goofy looking Red Goblin. But when this set of figures came out, this is the one I most wanted. And it's got some cool characters in it, like Silver Sable and Puma, characters that I don't already have. Like I've never had a Puma action figure before. This might even be the very first one. But yeah, Red Goblin. This is the first Red Goblin figure, by the way, too, because it's a very new character. It's pretty quick turnaround for a character to basically first be introduced and then get an action figure so soon. So anyway, part of the reason I wanted this is not only is it kind of neat, but I was never satisfied with the Green Goblin we got in the Marvel Legends line. It just doesn't look like how I want my Green Goblin to look. Like here's a Green Goblin figure from the 90s, and this to me is the perfect Green Goblin. That's what he's supposed to look like. And yeah, so this one here just didn't really do it for me, and neither did the Hobgoblin figure that followed. So I really wanted a Goblin figure that looked the way it was supposed to. Now, you might think this guy looks kind of dumb, but he does look like how he appeared in the comic books with these crazy like eyebrows and I don't know, the weird orange in his mouth there. Like, yeah, that's what he looked like. And I think he's just kind of neat. He's got these weird little tendrils like Carnage or any of the other symbiotes would have. He's got Pumpkin Bomb, the eyeballs of which are kind of coming off of its face. I'm not really sure why that is. But yeah, overall, I think this is a pretty cool figure. And yeah, I'm glad that I finally tracked him down. And I'm excited to get the rest of the figures in this wave. And the only other figure that I got this week was another figure from that wave of the Kingpin. So this is Black Spider-Man. And he came with the Kingpin's head. So there's that. He actually came with two heads. An angry head and a less angry head. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Anyway, so yeah, here's Black Spider-Man. Now, Black Spider-Man is nothing new. He's been around for forever. But this is kind of a different take on him. Now, let me break out a more traditional Black Spider-Man. So this figure here, this is not a Marvel Legends figure per se. This predates Marvel Legends. This is when Spider-Man was kind of first switching over from the animated line into a line they call, I think it's just called Spider-Man Classics, which was a little bit more detailed, a little more posable. So yeah, this figure was a big deal back in the day because of how posable it was. He's got lots of joints on him. But this was the problem I had with many early Marvel Legends is he's kind of scrawny and he's got too many joints. It makes him kind of hard to play with. Anyway, I have multiple versions of this Black Spider-Man in various scales. So when I started buying Marvel Legends, they did put out a new version of Black Suit Spider-Man, which was superior to this. But I chose not to get it just because I didn't feel I needed every version of Spider-Man. And I'm glad I didn't end up buying it back in the day because I was kind of forced to buy this one to get the Build-A-Figure. And they probably would have been too similar that I wouldn't really feel I'd need two Marvel Legends versions of this character on my shelf. But you will see some differences here. So for one, this Spider-Man's got clawed feet and he's got kind of claw hands instead of just the typical costumed hands and feet. And like the Red Lantern's Pumpkin Bomb, this Spider-Man, his mask, you'll see the eyeballs aren't attached. Like this guy's white eyes are just painted right on his mask. But this guy's come off in like a weird 3D. And I'm just not sure what that's about. I don't think it serves any practical purpose or even makes any sense. I think it was Humberto Ramos that drew Red Goblin and this suit in the same issue. Because this figure is also based off Amazing Spider-Man 800. In order to fight Red Goblin and his symbiote, Spider-Man had to remerge with the Venom symbiote. And this is what they called Symbiote Spider-Man. So, for whatever reason, rather than just looking like this, like he always used to look when he merged with the Venom costume, he now had clawed hands and feet and these weird eyes. And also you'll notice his spider emblem is a little different as well. Anyway, this is not a figure I felt I needed at all. I was just buying it for the Kingpin piece. I didn't really like the design in the comic book. And to my surprise, I actually think this is a pretty cool figure. I don't even know why. The way the eyes come off, it's different enough that I didn't feel like I was just buying another version of this thing. This thing does kind of feel like its own its own piece. And it's kind of just a one-off thing based on one single issue of a comic book. And really, it was only from a handful of pages in that comic book. So again, it's kind of weird they would choose to make a figure out of just that. But I kind of like it. I don't really know why. But yeah, it's kind of cool. Okay, so those are my purchases from this past week. Pretty light compared to some of my past videos, which is good. Every now and again, I need a light week. And yeah, so I guess let's move on to our movie segment. So,
Flick Chat.
So this is Flick Chat. Last week, I reviewed Shazam. And when I watched it back, I realized I didn't do a great job. Partly, I think I was distracted with my cat walking in front of the screen the whole time I was trying to do my review. But it is a little tough to do these spoiler-free reviews. At least it is for me because I'm kind of new to it. But yeah, a lot of the points I wanted to make about Shazam, I didn't end up making. I won't bother getting into it again. If you didn't watch my last video, I'll just tell you I didn't like Shazam. So, which is kind of weird because like it's getting seemingly really good reviews for the most part. On Rotten Tomatoes, it was up in the 90s. I don't know if it's still there, but in the lead up to its release, the first couple days it was out, had these very strong reviews. It was up in the 90s. I was reluctant to see it, but I was like, okay, well, if it's getting this strong a review, I'll check it out. And I thought it sucked. So that was kind of disappointing. Now this weekend, I was really excited about the new Hellboy movie. I'm a big Hellboy fan. I've loved the comics. You know, they've been around for almost 25 years now, and I've been on board with them since pretty early on. And I have everything that they've put out. There's been multiple spin-offs from the main Hellboy series. I love all of it. If I could only collect one comic book for the rest of my life, it would be Hellboy, and it's the Hellboy universe. I just love that stuff. And I liked the early movies. Even though it didn't quite match up to the comic books, I did like what Guillermo del Toro did with those first two movies. If somebody didn't like them, I wouldn't say, well, if you've seen the movies, you wouldn't like the comic books, because I thought they were so drastically different. Guillermo del Toro did a good job, took a lot of elements I liked, but it just didn't quite translate for me. And then when this one was coming out, this new one, and they were saying that they were going to stick closer to the comic books and it was going to be darker and all that sort of stuff, I was intrigued by it. But then the trailers came out and they had that weird like Moni and Smoke in the Water, and the songs just didn't match the visuals. And I also didn't know if I was really loving the visuals either. David Harbour's makeup I thought looked a little sketchy. And then the reviews hit earlier this week, a couple days ago. And it was sitting at, I think, 9 or 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was just getting horrible reviews. So I was like, well, that's pretty disappointing. That sucks. But there was no way I wasn't going to go see it. So I went to see it with very low expectations. And I'll tell you, I actually enjoyed it. So what do I know? Everybody loves Shazam. I hated it. Everybody hates Hellboy. I wouldn't say I loved it, but I liked it. And maybe it's because my expectations were low going in. But I did take a couple of notes this time just so I remembered some of the things I wanted to talk about. And I will try and be relatively spoiler-free, but there are a couple of things I'm going to talk about that, well, at least let you know some of the characters that pop up in the movie or anything. I won't ruin any plot points for you, but yeah, hopefully you've either already seen it or you have no intention of seeing it. But anyway. So first I want to talk about the cast a little bit. So like I said, I was a little worried about David Harbour when I saw the makeup. I only really know him from Stranger Things. He's been in some smaller roles, like I think maybe he was like a government agent in a Bond movie, I think. So I'm sure I've seen him in some of his like character role stuff, but he really kind of landed on everybody's radar as Hopper in Stranger Things, and I liked him a lot in that, and he was cast as Hellboy. I was fine with that. It was only when I started seeing the images that I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. Anyway, I thought it worked pretty well, actually. He was good in the role with what he had to work with. Like, as far as character development and everything, there wasn't a whole lot there for him. But I thought he did look good. And, his line delivery was good. He was appropriately kind of gruff. And, yeah, I enjoyed him. I thought he did, I don't know if I'd say just as good a job as Ron Perlman, but if he had as good a material to work with as Ron did, I think he would have been a fine replacement. If they had just recast the part to do like a third part in a trilogy, I would have been fine with this replacement. I thought he did a good job. There was Mila Jovovich as the villain, the Blood Queen. She didn't have a whole lot to do either, and some of her scenes were a little spotty from some bad effects, like because there's points where she gets some like battle damage and stuff, and it just didn't really work for me. There was a lot of sketchy effects in this movie. Like in one of the scenes when Mila Jovovich does have some battle damage that she heals from, one of her eyeballs hangs out, and it was one of those scenes that I assume this movie's playing in 3D. I didn't see it in 3D, but this is one of those scenes where you can just tell it was shot specifically for 3D audiences, which gets on my nerves a lot. Like, I think it was a Resident Evil trailer or something where somebody like throws some sunglasses at you in slow motion, and the sunglasses are spiraling at you, and you're just like, ooh, this would be cool in 3D. So yeah, her eyeball's like dangling, it's coming really close to the screen, and there was just a couple of things like that really kind of got on my nerves and seemed corny. Just not very effective that way. Anyway, Mila Jovovich, she looked really good, and she was fine in what little she had to do there. Ian McShane played Professor Broom, which is Hellboy's adopted father. He was fine. He also had not a lot to do, and the relationship wasn't all that believable, and it kind of needed to be because the storyline kind of hinged on their relationship at certain parts, which was odd because in the comic books that relationship was never a major focus. I thought like the father-son relationship wasn't really touched on until Guillermo del Toro's movies really made that a thing, and that kind of gave a new angle to Hellboy, a new spin on things, which I liked, that father-son dynamic. And you really felt bad when John Hurt's version of Professor Broom died, and it seemed to affect Hellboy a lot more than the death in the comic book say. So now people are expecting them to have this tight relationship, and seeing it not feel as tight, I don't know, felt a little off, especially when it was supposed to motivate Hellboy to be a better person or something. It just, I needed to see more of that relationship. There was, so I don't even know if I'm saying this right, one of the villains, he's kind of like the pig-faced, he's kind of like a boar walking around on his hind legs, and he didn't look very believable. I thought the special effects on him, they weren't bad, but he didn't look believable as a real thing that was there. Maybe if they had mixed it with some practical effects for certain scenes, but he was all CG, kind of like a Jar Jar Binks, and it was a little distracting at times. Anyway, he's just voiced by a guy named Stephen Graham, and I liked him. I went with a couple of my buddies, and my friend Guy said that was the worst part of the movie. He said every time that guy was on screen it bothered him, but I liked him. He was kind of funny, and he was voiced by Stephen Graham, who I know him best from playing Tommy in the movie Snatch. Anyway, so yeah, I liked that element of the movie. There was also the BPRD, kind of the supporting soldiers for Hellboy. So there was this one chick who is from the comic books. I'm forgetting her name at the moment, and I didn't write it in my notes. But yeah, she didn't really have much to do. She felt a little kind of shoehorned into the movie, and so did the other guy a little bit. So Daniel Day Kim played Ben, I guess Damio is how you say it. I always pronounced it Damio when I was reading it in comic books, but anyway, I was just really glad to see Damio, because he was a character I really liked from the comic books, and it was just nice to not see, as much as Abe Sapien's presence was missed because he's not in this movie, I didn't necessarily need to see everything that I'd seen in the old Hellboy movies redone, so it was kind of nice to get a new character here in Ben Damio, who we'd never seen on screen before. And yeah, he's got a transformation, and he turns into a CG creature, and that was, the CG on that was okay, but again, it didn't impact the plot much. Like, again, most of these characters, I keep saying this about everybody, they didn't have a whole lot to do. And this character didn't have a whole lot to do. I thought he was a good counterpoint to Hellboy. They kind of had a bit of an antagonistic relationship. And I liked the actor in the role. He seemed, kind of hard-edged, believable, like military guy. But yeah, I wish the transformation, I wish they used it a little more or just did something more with it. Because, yeah, I've got a stack of books here for a second. I want to haul up here. Because now I want to talk a little bit about the plot. And it was kind of all over the place. And the reason for that is they stitched together a couple of different Hellboy stories. Like, if you've ever read Hellboy, there's an overarching storyline that's lasted basically all 25 years. But mostly it's in miniseries that last like 4 or 5 issues. So there's a solid story with a beginning and an end. There's also a lot of short stories, which only last for like maybe 5 pages of this Hellboy meeting a creature, beating it up, and that being it. Anyway, so this movie here was kind of throwing a lot of things, pulling these little short stories, and I never thought the movie was boring. I've seen in some other reviews people saying it's boring. I thought it moved at a very good clip and never got boring, but just a little disjointed. And I thought if you hadn't read these stories to kind of understand where they're coming from, I imagine for a viewer that had no prior knowledge of Hellboy, they'd be a little lost. Anyway, so like, for example, the opening scene of the movie, he's going to, I don't actually think, is he in Mexico? I think so, or some Mexico-like place. But he goes down there and he has to fight like a luchador vampire, which is a fun scene. Again, it suffers from effects not being quite up to snuff that we've come to expect for these high-budget movies. But it was a fun scene, and there's a whole graphic novel of Hellboy in Mexico, where he does that very thing. You can see on the back here, there he is hanging out with some luchadors. So they took elements from this. Also, if you've seen the trailer, he's fighting some giants and all that stuff. And that stuff comes directly from this book here, The Wild Hunt. So there's elements taken directly from this. And then there's also the stuff with so Mila Jovovich is the Blood Queen, and that's a whole nother Hellboy story. The Warthog guy, he was originally introduced in just a little short story where he was impersonating a baby or whatever, and so they've taken his story and kind of put it in here too. So it's all these things kind of stitched together, and I don't know if it really works as a movie for a coherent storyline, but I like just seeing this stuff on screen. And I want to talk about, so with Ben Damio. So this is him on the cover of this book here. So this is BPRD, one of the Hellboy spin-offs. And so you see his face is like kind of half ripped off, and they do try and recreate that in the movie, but it's not as quite nasty as it looks there. The actor just has 3 scratches kind of across his face. But this, I think, is the first book, because Ben had been around for a little while in the books, and it's in this one where he first transforms into the were-jaguar. Let's see if we can find that in here. Yeah, it's hard to make out what's going on here on this page, maybe. I think that's him in a transformation. And yeah, so like there's a shot of Ben Damio as the were-jaguar attacking some BPRD crew. And you'll notice this guy all mangled up at the bottom. I don't find the Hellboy books are usually all that gory. Every now and again they are. And this movie really ran with that. Like, it was rated R. And there's a ton of gore. Like, it doesn't offend me or bother me, but it does seem kind of needless. Like, I don't think you really needed it in there. And the fact that it now is, rated R and it's going to limit anybody under the age of 17 or 18 or whatever to go see this movie, I don't think that was a good idea, especially seeing how its returns came back this weekend. It lost to Shazam and even to that movie Little. So it came in third, which isn't great. It might have helped if it wasn't restricted, because I don't really think that enhanced the movie a whole lot. Yeah, and I just want to show you, this is one of my favorite BPRD stories. This is one where the art on this is just amazing. So that's Ben Damio as the were-jaguar. And yeah, this is some gory stuff here. So here he's like ripping guys apart and biting people's faces off and stuff. And it was just awesome. And there's a great cover of him there. This is actually probably one of the bloodier BPRD stories. But yeah, so in this episode, he's fighting this Wendigo. There's this dude here, and yeah, they have this epic fight scene. There's just the cover. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off track here with this movie review, but I just love this particular. Like, I love this comic series, but in particular this storyline. Like, you can just feel the movement on these pages of these characters duking it out. It was just awesome. So if you've never read any Hellboy and BPRD and stuff, I strongly recommend you do, because there's some great stuff out there. And don't let the movie, if you think it's a clunker, don't let that deter you, because it was awesome. Now here's a bit of a spoiler. One of the characters that pops up in this movie, and it is really just a cameo, and I'm sure there, again, people with no background on Hellboy might be like, who is this guy? It did seem like he was just kind of stuffed in there because they wanted him to be there, but I was pretty stoked to see him. It was Lobster Johnson. Now this guy, if you just saw the movie and you're like, yeah, who was that guy? So you'll see here, he's got a whole series of books of his own, and he's an important character in Hellboy's mythology, I guess. He is Hellboy's kind of idol. He was like an early member of the BPRD, kind of a pulp hero in the same vein as like the Phantom or the Shadow and stuff like that. Anyway, I was just really excited to see him on screen. I'm a big fan of Lobster Johnson, and he was portrayed by Thomas Hayden Church, who played the Sandman in Spider-Man 3. Anyway, I'm a big fan of his from the movie Sideways and all that other stuff. Anyway, so it was really fun to have Lobster Johnson show up. What else can we talk about here? Yeah, the action sequences, there's lots of them, whether it's fighting a vampire in a wrestling ring, or fighting this giant warthog, or Ben Damio turned into a were-jaguar, or if you've seen the trailer, at some point all hell breaks loose and there's monsters knocking over the London Bridge and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of cool effects. And yet despite all that, with monsters knocking over the London Bridge, I never felt the stakes were very high. Like, they kind of mention that the Blood Queen is going to bring about the end of humanity and that a plague will wipe out the human race. But despite all that, and they even show some of that, I never felt like the stakes were high. Like, the heroes, I don't feel ever really acted like we have to stop this now. They were like doing their job and still kind of making wisecracks here and there too. It was a little odd. And as I mentioned, the effects are a little spotty at times. One in particular that drove me crazy is, I won't tell you how, but the characters are able to communicate with the recently deceased. And when they do that, the effect that accompanies the deceased becoming reanimated, it was gross and not cool looking. Just dumb. It looked dumb. So, yeah, there you go. There is some threads laid for clearly what was intended to be a sequel. It doesn't look very promising for a sequel based on the reviews and the earnings. So it's a shame, because I would have liked to see where they could have gone following this path. Yeah. So overall, I did enjoy this movie. Like, I was a little worried from the trailer again, where it showed Hellboy's origin with the Nazis in the circle summoning this beast from hell. And it was kind of like when, they did the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies and they were retelling Spider-Man's origin. And I was thinking, like, did they really think anybody needs to see this again? Like, I liked how Marvel handled it with Tom Holland. He's just already Spider-Man. We don't need to see his origin again. And Hellboy, even though that movie was 15 years ago, it's just like, there only was 2 Hellboy movies. I don't think we need to start redoing what we'd already seen. But what I liked about it is they did do kind of a different spin on it. They changed it up enough so that I didn't feel like I was watching the same thing. It kind of surprised me how they went in that like origin scene. And yeah, it was a different movie. It was where it was a reboot, not a sequel, but they didn't just tread the same ground over and over again. It was new creatures, a new storyline. Yeah, so I liked it. So yeah, if you're a Hellboy fan, I'd say absolutely go check it out. I can't promise you'll like it, depending on what you get out of it. But I'd say as a B movie, it was a lot of fun. In the same way that I like all the Japanese Godzilla movies. I can't tell you that the Japanese Godzilla movies are good movies, per se. There's corny acting and bad rubber suits and all that stuff, but I just love them because they're kind of because they're bad. And with Hellboy, that's not necessarily a great endorsement, but going in with such low expectations, I was pleasantly surprised that, like, yeah, it's got some cheesy one-liners and it's got some spotty effects, but the story moves fast. It's fun. There's cool monsters. Like one monster I want to talk about is the Baba Yaga, who is a witch who's very prominent in the Hellboy mythos. And again, this was a character that I felt, if I didn't have any background on Hellboy, I'd be like, who is this character? Like, she shows up and then leaves, and the storyline kind of never picks up on her again. And you're like, okay, I guess, whatever. But knowing how important she is in the overall scheme of things, I thought she looked really cool. The effects on her and her haunted house and everything, I really liked the scene that she was featured in. But yeah, I think that's really all I have to say about Hellboy. So that's it for movies. Like, I watched Black Klansman this week. It was pretty good. But otherwise, I just want to quickly touch on movie trailers that came out. So there was Star Wars that came out at Star Wars Celebration. And assuming if you're a nerd and you're watching a toy guy's channel, so you probably are, I'm sure you've seen the Star Wars trailer. So it was good. It's about what I would expect for kind of a first teaser. Like, there's nothing in the storyline revealed. Most of it is some voiceover over Rey and Kylo Ren kind of facing off, which of course we knew that was going to happen in this movie. Otherwise, there's just a couple of shots of some spaceships and whatever. There's not a whole lot to talk about in there. I was glad to see Kylo Ren's got his helmet back. It's cool to see Lando back. Seeing Leia was kind of a surprise. Because the shot, I assume they must have reused that from footage from the other movies that they hadn't used, because as far as I know, she had passed away before they'd even begun filming this. And, you know, we were kind of left to wonder, are we going to see a CG Princess Leia? I think there'd been an official announcement saying they weren't going to do that, or they weren't going to recast. So I don't know if she's in this movie much at all, but at least we know she's in it at least a little bit. Couple other big things is the laugh at the end of the trailer, so that sounds like the Emperor Palpatine is maybe back. Okay. And then also the title. I think this was the first reveal of the title, the first I saw it. So Rise of Skywalker. Interesting, seeing as we killed the last Skywalker off last movie. But Luke does the whole voiceover, so I don't know if he's just back as a Force ghost. I don't know if that's going to imply that Rey is his daughter somehow or something. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. It's an interesting title. I have lots of questions, and I'm excited to get them answered. Another trailer that came out is The Joker. I think Joker actually came out a week earlier, but I didn't talk about it last week. And again, I don't have a whole lot to say about it now, other than I'm excited to see this movie. I didn't know how to feel about it when I heard they were making it, because, as I said about Shazam, I have not liked any of these DC movies. I can watch some of them, like Justice League, I think has enough good stuff in there. Like, I like The Flash and whatever, and it was short enough that I can put it in and just kind of watch it as a dumb popcorn flick. But other ones, like Man of Steel, for one, it's too dark and it's too long. Like, I never want to put it in just to pass the time. It's too much to deal with. And even the ones that have been well received, like Wonder Woman and Aquaman, haven't really done it for me. And like Jared Leto's version of the Joker, he was interesting, but, you know, I didn't know what they were going to do with that. It just seemed like a weird idea to have this weird tatted up Joker and this old Batman. I didn't know how that was all going to work, and I don't think they knew how it was going to work. It doesn't seem like they think anything through. And then they announced this Joker solo movie, and it wasn't going to be tied to the rest of the DC universe. And at the same time, they were talking about making a Harley and Joker movie, so there'd be like 2 Joker movies out with 2 different guys. Now, I can wrap my head around that. As a comic book guy, I understand what Elseworlds are and alternate realities, and there can be 2 different books of the same character, like Spider-Man and Ultimate Spider-Man. It's not that hard to understand. But I worry about general audiences because, I talk to people about this stuff at work, people that aren't super nerds, but they might like the movies and the comic books. And they said to me, like, how can there be 3 Spider-Men? I'm so confused by this. Or how's a prequel come after this movie? Like, where's this Han Solo movie fit into? Like, people get very confused by these things unless they're in the know. And yeah, I don't know, having two Joker movies and having this Joker movie and people are going to wonder how it ties into Ben Affleck or stuff. I don't know if they're shooting themselves in the foot by just making it confusing to audiences. But just watching the trailer, it looks interesting. Like, it's a different take on him. When I first saw that clown makeup with the red nose, I thought, oh god, looks bad. But watching the trailer, there's kind of like the Star Wars movie. There's not much story revealed. There's hardly any shots of the actual Joker. It's mostly just Joaquin Phoenix, I assume probably in the first act of the movie, the pre-Joker Joaquin. So, yeah, who knows where they're going to go with it. I kind of hope they avoid Batman or any of the other Nightwing or any of those characters. I'd just like them to stick to a semi-realistic crime movie, maybe. So, I hope that's what they're doing. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on Joker.
Comic booking.
Okay, so in this segment, we're going to talk about the comic books I read this week. And I didn't pick up a whole lot. One that I finally got, but I haven't read yet, is Transformers Unicron. I am excited to read this. This is the official end of the Transformers universe from IDW. So there was a couple of books being published by them simultaneously. There was Lost Light and Optimus Prime. And those have both already wrapped up. Like, I've read the collections on those, so I know how those end. But this was a specific, I think, 6 or 8 issue miniseries called Transformers Unicron, which wrapped up the whole, not just Transformers universe, but the whole Hasbro shared universe with G.I. Joe and ROM and Micronauts and Mask. I don't know if those guys will be featured in here. They probably will be, at least a little bit. I don't know if everybody's going to die or what, but yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this. So I'll let you know next week. I did pick up Major X #1. And if you're not familiar with this, so Rob Liefeld is a comic book artist that worked for Marvel in the 90s. Him along with like Todd McFarlane, if you're familiar with him, he's the guy that created Venom and all that sort of stuff. So all these hotshot artists came in the 90s. They really boosted all the sales over at Marvel. They were like rock stars over there. Their books were selling like crazy. Then they decided to like branch out. They left Marvel. They started their own comic book company. Everybody thought they were crazy, but Image Comics was actually a success, at least, especially early on. All their books were breaking sales records, and Image is still going today, 20 some years later, and it's the third biggest comic publisher. And I think it's held that title for a long, long time now. And yeah, they're doing pretty well. And some of those core books that launched Image Comics, like Spawn from Todd McFarlane and Savage Dragon from Eric Larson, are still going strong. Anyway, so Rob Liefeld was one of those, hotshot young artists that came into Marvel in the 90s. And he's become kind of a joke in the comic book industry because of his art. It is bad, I guess you could say. But at the same time, I will readily admit I was won over by him in the 90s. Because when I started buying comic books when I was a little kid, all the comic books I felt were drawn, like the Spider-Man in the comic book looked like the Spider-Man on my bed sheets or on my garbage can. So there was this kind of house style for Marvel. So it wasn't too jarring when one artist left a book and another one came on. And I think that was kind of a policy to keep everything kind of in a similar style. And that seemed to change right around the time that I was getting into comic books. So at the time, I didn't really appreciate, say, John Romita or Jack Kirby, how great their art was when I was young. It just kind of looked like standard comic book art to me. And so when these guys like McFarlane and Liefeld came on in the 90s, I was won over. I was like, wow, these guys are so dynamic. These characters look brand new. They don't look like the kind of stiff, stuffy old versions from the 70s and 80s. Like, this is a fresh take on it. And I bought into it. Liefeld showed up on The New Mutants, which was kind of a lesser X-Men book. And then he morphed that into X-Force, into a top seller. And then when he left and went to Image, he started Youngblood and 20 other books, which they all got canceled after like 3 issues because he couldn't keep up with the deadlines. And so despite that initial popularity when people kind of went back and revisited his artwork, especially maybe when the internet came around and people could kind of share their thoughts on this stuff, people realized that he couldn't draw very well. Like his proportions were all out of whack, and he couldn't draw feet or hands or backgrounds, or like there was a lot of problems with his artwork, even though it was kind of at a glance, it was dynamic. But then when you kind of really pieced it apart, you realize this guy can't draw some basic stuff. And for him to be, to an artist for a living, he should be able to draw that stuff. But I guess he was just self-taught. He never went to art school or anything. Anyway, he's been kicking around the industry. He doesn't do a whole lot anymore, but it was announced that he was coming back to Marvel with a brand new character called Major X. And you might notice he looks familiar. He looks a lot like Deadpool. Rob Liefeld's the guy that created Deadpool, and since Deadpool has really blown up in the last couple of years, Liefeld's been getting a lot more of attention lately. And he also created Cable, who was introduced in Deadpool 2, the movie, and so all of his characters are becoming really popular. So he thought, well, this is a good time to introduce a new one, and it's so Rob Liefeld of him to create a character that looks just like his other character, except with a bucket on his head. And I don't know what I expected from this, but he actually writes it and draws it, which is a bad sign because he was never a great writer. And yeah, so very early on, here's Major X kicking ass. He's stepping on Cable's head. He's fought his way into the X-Men mansion. And the story is, there's not a whole lot of story here, and it is, a little clunky. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's horrible compared to, a lot of the other comic books I read. But, like, just as an example of Liefeld's-ness, like, this whole battle, it seems like they're standing right in front of this wall. Like, there's no distance. Like, he never draws any floors, to show how far away they are from this wall. They're just always right there. And, like, this guy here, this is like a alternate version of Beast. So Cable and this Major X guy are fighting, and then like Beast leaps at Cable. And just when you see, like, I know I'm being nitpicky here, but I can't help myself when I look at Rob Liefeld art. Like, how far is Cable standing from this wall? I would guess not very far. And then Beast is leaping with such force. Like, where is he coming from? How did he get such a good running start from there? Like, it just seems to look like ridiculous. Like, he has no sense of direction and things like that. And I think maybe he would draw, if he drew some angled floors to show some perspective, you'd know how far away characters are from one another. But he doesn't know how to do that stuff. So there's just a ton of that in this book where I was just like, oh god. Like, here he is, then Wolverine shows up, of course. And so, like, this scene here, again, they're fighting right up against the wall. There's no floor there, so they're very close. And Evil Beast, you see, kicks Wolverine into the wall there. Wolverine snarls at him and then leaps at him. And this panel here, like, Wolverine is bent over, at 180 degrees, and he's charging him. And it's just like, how did he just got thrown against the wall, and like, how does he launch himself in such a fashion? It just doesn't make sense. And these punches, everybody's heads get like contorted backwards in such a way that isn't normal. Anyway, then of course Deadpool shows up, so now you've got, and actually, sorry, this is a new character called Dreadpool, which I think it's Deadpool from another universe. So now you've got Cable, Dreadpool, Major X, and then Deadpool shows up. So now you've got Deadpool fighting Dreadpool. And then there's a surprise reveal at the end when Major X takes his helmet off, which I won't spoil for you in case you want to read this. I thought it was very dumb, but I guess enjoyable in that dumb kind of way. And it's a 6-issue miniseries, and from what I understand, Rob Liefeld is writing it all, and he's going to be back to draw issue 6, but he's not drawing any of the middle issues, which, again, is very typical Rob Liefeld. I'm sure they probably could have given him the time if he said, I will draw all this, but he just seems lazy sometimes and thinks, I'll draw the start and the end, and I'll let somebody else draw the middle. Like, I can't imagine why. I'm sure Marvel would sell more copies if he drew them all, because he does have a weird following, even if it is just almost like a freak show, like you just want to see it. But yeah, I don't know. So that's Major X. The other books I picked up were more of my standard stuff, all Spider-Man. So I picked up 2 issues of The Amazing Spider-Man. So if you've watched my other videos, I've talked about this before. So the ongoing storyline is Hunted, which is focused on Kraven the Hunter. And so they're doing the regular number issues. So this is issue 19. But then they're also doing these in-between issues. So there was an issue 18. Now this is issue 18.HU, which takes place between 18 and 19. And it focuses on one particular character in the Hunted storyline. So in issue 17.HU, we get a story focusing on the Black Cat. And this one here, it focuses on the Gibbon, which is like kind of a D-list Spidey villain for a guy with like kind of a monkey body. So yeah, there's a flashback of Gibbon fighting Spider-Man. And they were both written by Nick Spencer, and I've had some issues with Spencer's storytelling. And this Gibbon book, can't say I'm a fan of that cover by Greg Land. I'm not a big Greg Land fan. It's kind of like photorealistic, I guess is what he goes for. But the interior art I actually quite like. Yeah, so there's Gibbon is being hunted by these robot Kravens. And I gotta say, I liked this story. This was pretty good. This one, not so much. Like this is back to the kind of the core story. There's a lot of stuff I struggle to get past with Nick Spencer's writing. Characters just aren't acting the way I feel they should act. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see how this thing pans out, but I'm not loving it. And then the other Spider-Man book is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Now, I've complained about this one thus far too. This is issue 5, and it's the start of a new storyline, I guess. The first 4 issues, he was dealing with some kids from a secret New York City underground, which I thought was really dumb. So I was hoping maybe it would pick up steam with this issue. And I'm going to spoil it for you if you haven't read it. But that's okay, because I'd like to think I'm saving you from wasting your money on this stupid fucking comic book. So, in the first 4 issues, they had kind of teased that Aunt May has got cancer. Which is, that's sad news. It would have more impact if Aunt May hadn't already died in the past and come back, and she knew Peter was Spider-Man and then she forgot, and they've done so much with Aunt May over the years. She's been sick and dying since before I was even born in the comic book. So it's hard she's sick again. It doesn't have a whole lot of weight because I'm sure she'll be fine. So anyway, we've known, the readers have known that Aunt May is sick, but Peter hasn't known. So the last issue, I think, ended with Aunt May saying, "Peter, we need to talk." So here they are having their heart-to-heart talk. And this had the potential to possibly be sad. Like Aunt May says to him, here she says, "My first round of chemotherapy is tomorrow. I hate to ask, but I was hoping you could be there." And I would expect Spider-Man to say, "I will absolutely be there, Aunt May. You can count on me." And then in typical Spider-Man fashion, he'd be on his way to the hospital, and there'd be a bank robbery or somebody being mugged, and he would have to weigh his options. Do I go sit with my aunt, or do I go help this person? And, if you've seen his origin story, he can't let something like that go, because that's what happened. He ignored something bad happening, and his Uncle Ben got killed as a result. So, of course, he would have to go save the day, miss Aunt May's appointment, couldn't explain to her why, because she currently doesn't know that he's Spider-Man. And that would be the tragedy of Peter Parker. But instead, so she says, "I was hoping you could be there to come with me." And he cuts her off, and he says, "I have a lot going on right now, Aunt May." And she says, "Of course." And then she gives him a hug and leaves. And there is no Spider-Man saying, "I had to do that because I already have to go fight the Kingpin or save the world tomorrow." He just said, "I have a lot going on." And then he goes out running around, swinging around the city as Spider-Man does. And there's an inner monologue saying, oh, I don't want to deal with this. I gotta swing around to clear my head. I hope I find some crime. And then he finds like a carjacker being chased by the cops. So he swings after the carjacker, lands on the hood, pulls the guy out of the car, and accidentally breaks the wrist of the carjacker. The carjacker happens to be some kid from his neighborhood that he recognizes. They have a little heart-to-heart down here. And then the cops are coming. So Spider-Man says, well, I don't want you to get arrested. So Spidey jumps in the car, and now Spider-Man is driving the car. And so he stole a car with this carjacker. And when they're running from the police, Spider-Man just sticks his arm out the window. He says, whip. And he manages to hoist the whole car from the strength of his arm from a web, and then he hides it up in the sky, and the cops don't know where the car went, so then they leave. So now Spidey and the carjacker are off the hook. Spidey takes the carjacker to Doctor Strange to heal his broken wrist, rather than to a hospital. And then, after an awkward little talk with Doctor Strange, cut to the hospital the next day. Aunt May's there for her chemo, and then the nurse informs her that her nephew Peter is already there waiting for her. And she's like, oh, thank goodness. And Peter's like, well, it was the right thing to do. So he had a change of heart after his night out with the carjacker. And I just don't understand at all. Why would Spider-Man tell his Aunt May that he's too busy to go to her chemotherapy, and then have to go think about it, clear his head, and realize, like, yeah, you know what? Doing the right thing is what I'm all about. I'm going to go. Like that. If you can explain it to me that there was something else going on here that I missed, I just thought this was so dumb and a slap in the face to fans of Spider-Man. That's not how Spider-Man behaves. Like in the first scenario I laid out for you, that's what happens to Spider-Man, is he tries to do right, but then bad things happen. He ends up letting down the people he loves, and that's, the Parker luck. And he's never has much luck. But this is just, he goes from basically telling his aunt to fuck off, to stealing a car, to abusing his friendship with Doctor Strange, to pulling off these ridiculous feats of strength that he should not be able to do. I thought this was absolute shit, and I don't think I can keep buying it, but it pains me to do that because I buy all Spider-Man books. I'm always worried if I stop buying this now, and then by issue 8 some new writer will come on, and then it'll be really good, and then I'll hate that I'm missing 2 books in the run, because I'm a collector and a completist like that. So I just feel like I just got to tough this out until it either gets canceled or somebody better comes along. And then what's even more frustrating is they've got a printed 2 pages of letters in the back, and it's all just praise, and usually Marvel, I like to think they don't just publish the positive, because sometimes negative letters do end up in the back. But this is a new book. It's only in issue 5, and this seems to be the response to the first 2 issues or so, which I also thought was shit. And everybody's just saying positive things about what a nice new take on Spider-Man this is. So I guess I'm in the minority on this too. Please let me know what you think below. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with this. It sucks. It's garbage. Anyway, so I guess that's this episode of Mike's Collection. So sorry if it ran a little long. But yeah, I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching.